Okay, so this thing sat outside, went and drove it around yesterday, did some testing on stuff, checking for leaks and whatnot. So far it seems okay, but it is really, really cold out today. I think right now it's low 20s according to the phone, and this thing sat outside all night. It hasn't been started today. So, see if it'll... See how the cold start is. Okay then. That started better than it did yesterday, oddly enough. Here, I'm curious. I'm going to plug the scanner in, see what the temperature is. Engine core temp, 32 degrees. So, that started pretty good. Okay, working on this thing again. This one still is leaking a little bit. Need to reflare that one, like how I did this side. That side's not leaking. That's not the point of this, though. What I'm going to try and do here is, this is like a 1-inch water neck. This is the original hose from the Tahoe, the upper radiator hose that I cut off here because it originally ran way over here, and there's no way I can make it hook up to this radiator without kinking. And the bigger problem was this is not a 1-inch port here on the radiator, so how I did that is, well, it's kind of hard to see in there. Whenever I take this apart it'll be better, but there's a 1-inch copper coupler, just for generic copper pipe, whatever came from Lowe's, that was 1 inch inner diameter, so it was a snug fit inside of this tube. I slid it in there. This was actually a piece of the original lower radiator hose from the Tahoe. Slid that on top of both of them, so it's the copper on the inside, this one in the middle, this one on top, and then hose clamped together. But I was having problems with trying to keep this one sealed up, and I don't know if it's the hose is just ever so slightly too big, or if it's this port here, because this port here looks like this radiator may have been dropped or something at some point. I tried to straighten it up whenever I first got it, but this side here is flat compared to the rest of it. So I've got that to fix, and I think I have pretty much the exact same problem going on with both of those heater core lines because they're kind of doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to try and put this on there. This is from that engine that used to be in this. So this has a bigger water neck that appears to be pretty much the exact same size as that. So I might be able to find a radiator hose that'll fit, because nobody in town that I could find has a radiator hose that's small on one end and then bigger on the other with that's bend in it. So hopefully I'll be able to make something happen with this. Okay, so working on the upper radiator hose again. Got the thermostat sitting in there. I'm going to have to make a plate to cover up that EGR port just so that doesn't leak, because I'd have a vacuum leak otherwise. And the main problem that I mentioned is this original one to this engine series is a much smaller diameter than the port on the radiator. So I had these two other ones. This one was off of the intake that my dad put on that 350, and it's the correct diameter, but it doesn't fit. It hits the intake manifold on this side right here. This one came off of the intake that was originally on that 350 whenever my dad got it, and you can see when they sit side by side, this piece is more centered than this piece. This piece is over further, which allows it to sit on the intake without hitting the, because it hits this port right here, that part where I guess it pulls the EGR gas back into the intake. But this one's shimmied over a little bit more so it clears, and it's GM 336773 is the number on it. And so I'm going to put that on. I got some universal hose. There's the part number, all that stuff. I'm going to see if I can get that to fit on there because I couldn't find a radiator hose. Because most of them come out forward and go over like this. Many of them are that diameter and go around and come through. So I thought maybe I could find a water neck that'd bring it up and over, but I don't know. I didn't want to have to mess with it, maybe hitting the AC compressor or something. So I don't know. Put this together and see how it works out. So here's the final product. I had to cut a little bit off of each hose. I ended up cutting about that much off of it. Maybe a inch and a quarter, inch and a half at most. Combined. So I don't know, probably 3/4 of an inch off each side. And I actually had to push with the screwdriver, push the spring in a little bit on each side so that it wouldn't hit the port so I could slide the hose on further. This size, the next smallest size they had, I'm certain would not have worked because it was about 3 inches shorter than this one, and there's no way that would have worked. So I got this on. All I did is I drilled the holes out just a little bit bigger and kind of walled them out just a little bit side to side so that I could rotate this housing just a little bit more. And that seems to allow me plenty of clamps there because I can slide that piece of plastic back there without any problem. So that all should be good. Clears the AC compressor. Seems to clear. It clears the bolt right there. I mean, I can't get my hands behind it, but I don't know. It doesn't feel like that piece of plastic's hanging up on it any. And then just like the original setup with this hose here, the spliced together one, it sits on here. But I did what I did right here, drilled a hole through it and put a zip tie through it with this insulate. Well, actually, I think it came from some scrap from that loom, but just to give it something to set on. And it's on there pretty good, so it looks pretty good. This hose was a much tighter fit than the one that I spliced onto there, so hopefully it won't leak. Because that's what that one over there was doing, is it was just kind of seeping, letting coolant seep out through there for whatever reason. So, and then next thing I got to do is screw around with these heater core hoses because they're doing the same thing that one was doing. So I got to figure out what's going on with that. The top one, if I remember, one of them, I don't know, isn't perfectly circular. It's like somebody stepped on it or something at one point or another, and it's kind of oval shaped. So I got to mess with that next. I got to make a plate to cover up that EGR port. And I don't know, just some small stuff here and there, but it looks pretty good. It looks better than the other one, than having a big ugly clamp there and some frayed radiator hose. But in a pinch, that did work. That little piece of 1-inch copper in there to clamp down on it. Because yeah, I mean, oh, there it is. So I couldn't pull that off by hand, or with just, one hand on each side. But so there's that hose. That was part of the lower radiator hose, and now you can see that copper sleeve in there. It runs back to about right there where my thumb is. But yeah, so that allowed me to do that, and it did work. It did not leak there, surprisingly enough. But so there's that. Moving on to the next thing. Okay, back working on the 68. So we got to get rid of the EGR because wherever it went, here it is. I can't put it on there now because of that larger water neck, which I have to have the larger water neck because I need a 1.5" fit, whatever. I have an 1.5" fitting on the radiator, so the water neck needs to be 1.5". Thus, it's big enough that I can't have the valve on there. So I don't need the valve anyways, because when we reprogrammed the computer, because this is in a 68 C10 now, we ditched all of the emission stuff. So you can't really see it because of the hose. You can kind of see it down there. Anyways, the hose that ran from the manifold all the way up, whenever we first got this going, I just cut that off, kinked it, and folded it over itself and screwed it back in there to seal it up. But this will pretty much seal that up completely, because the way I understand this bottom port is what connects to that hole over there and then would run to the exhaust manifold, and then this top port here runs into the intake. So I have to plug it so I don't have a vacuum leak. But in plugging it here like this, I shouldn't even need to plug that other port. So I got to get rid of that. And yeah, the computer is tuned so it doesn't need that. It knows it's not there. So I cut this little plate, which looks kind of rough, but it's going to sit in there about like that. Or actually like that maybe. And it's, I don't know what that is, 3/16. I'm just going to use the old gasket. And I'm going to bolt that on there so that I don't have to mess with that anymore. So that's how I did the EGR delete on this, and we'll see how it works afterwards. Okay, so minor update on the truck. I'm replacing this heater core hose, the heater core hose that goes here, and this bypass hose, because I believe they are all original to the Tahoe that this engine came out of. So that would mean that they are 19 years old and have had 240-some thousand miles worth of use on them. And wherever it went. So this one in particular is pretty soft. And it's kind of starting to flake off on the outside. And probably not going to be able to see it on the inside. But on the inside, it's actually real spongy on the inside, and I can pull off bits of it if I stick my finger in there. So those are definitely not in the best of shape, so now's a good time to replace those. This clamp here was tucked way down there, and I could not get to it, but I took this idler pulley off, and I used, wherever they went, this small pair of vice grips to clamp down on them. And that was how I got the clamp off. I tried, wherever they went, keep losing stuff. I tried these pliers with a 90-degree bend on it, but they were just way too big. But so that's how I got that clamp out of there. The hoses, which are over here, these were from Rock Auto, although we've had some problems with them in the past. Part number for the one, part number for the bypass one, and then I had to just buy like 6 feet of that for the long heater core hose that actually runs to the heater core. So there's all that. I did start, and I have run it with this block off plate here. Doesn't seem to be any problems whatsoever. Engine runs fine, no check engine light, doesn't appear to be a vacuum leak, no weird noise. So that's pretty much that. Gonna put these on, and I may mess with this lower radiator hose because I'm not sure how much it's actually slid down on the underside of the hose. So I may look into that because it's kind of bugging me. Other than that though, gonna put these hoses on and not worry about this.